Within the past century or so, the media industry has become a more prominent figure in our society. Upwards of 5,000 media products are made per year, whether they're films, TV series, or animation, and they generate tens of billions per year in revenue.
Where's the Italian? Oh!
Because of the revenue which the media industry generates, there became a hefty demand for media as a whole, leading to the creation of cable networks, later being replaced by streaming services in the digital era. No longer do they only host content from studios and TV networks, but also have the capital to commission their own content.
Holy shit! Bingo!
A bulk of the content being commissioned by streaming services being bingeable and marketable TV series.
Parcel of Stranger Things Funko Pops.
Anything from Netflix's Cobra Kai, Amazon Prime's Invincible, to HBO's Peacemaker, and Disney Plus's The Mandalorian. All of these services feature a vast library of content, which is accompanied by a vast range of quality and artistic integrity.
This is art.
While none of these services are strangers to cancelling projects, they're also no stranger to keeping TV series going on for long periods of time, for a variety of different reasons. Most of these shows are genuinely good and are left open to have more stories told. Others have great potential to land the platform substantial revenue, but a contributing factor as to why these shows generate such income is because they're a victim of today's topic: hate watching. When mentioning the term hate watching, some of you in the audience may view it as a foreign concept, while others may be all too familiar with it, but allow me to define it for those who are unacquainted with the action. Hate watching is a noun defined as the activity of watching a television program for the sake of the enjoyment derived from mocking or criticizing it. I don't think this definition really does the action justice, since hate watching isn't just present in the consumption of television programs, but the consumption of any type of media, anywhere from sports, to influencers, to entire film franchises, with hate watching primarily being present in the consumption of media from Marvel, Disney, and Star Wars, while the prevailing critiques from the masses surrounding how woke each of these IPs have become.
Shut up! Woke show is bad.
Woke Hollywood is failing, and that's a good thing.
Woke shit.
Shut up!
Woke ideology.
Personally, I don't think that wokeness or progressiveness being present in modern media is an inherently bad thing. Portraying these kinds of things in film and TV is important to a certain extent, but they do rely heavily on execution. You aren't the CEO of racism for identifying where progressive themes have been shoehorned into a story and executed badly. And on the other side of the coin, you aren't Mr. Communism for identifying where progressiveness has been executed well in a story. Bad execution is bad execution, and good execution is good execution. Nothing more to it than that. Now, I'm not going to go into why people hate watch things. There have been numerous studies made on that topic, and I know that people like pretending to be smarter than they actually are on the internet.
Really care about that you think that.
But personally, I think LARPing as a psychologist would be too pretentious, even for me. However, I would like to discuss why hate watching does more harm than good. When I say more harm than good, I will not be presenting a moral or legal argument against hate watching. Instead, I'll be coming from a perspective which surrounds bad faith criticism and the enabling of poorly made as well as problematic media. There are numerous examples where hate watching has led to a lot of bad faith discussion surrounding film and TV, as well as the unintentional enabling of media products that are problematic and just generally low quality. This lack of quality can spawn in many different ways, whether that be writing, cinematography, acting, visual effects, and many more, with my primary example being the recent release of HBO's Velma. As you'd already know, Velma is an adaptation of Scooby-Doo. Sorry, not an adaptation, a reimagining, which instead of focusing on the entire Scooby-Doo cast of Freddy, Shaggy, Daphne, Scooby, and Velma, HBO's reimagination elects to hone in on Velma, but she isn't the character that you'd expect, due to the adult tone that HBO chose to run with. Let's face it, none of these characters are who you'd expect them to be. The adult tone of this show isn't really adult though, it just includes the SSVD, which is an acronym for swearing, sex, violence, and drugs.
Cocaína.
And the inclusion of SSVD isn't anything new in the adult animation genre. If anything, it's the reason why the adult label is slapped on. Regardless of playing into genre tropes, this series does have its fair share of issues, such as its characterization, the overuse of meta-humor, the breakneck speed of the show's pacing, as well as how confused the show is on who it's trying to appeal to. And of course, Velma inevitably got backlash, with the reactionaries doing what they do best: reacting.
Woke Hollywood.
With the prevailing criticism throughout all of these videos made about Velma mounting up to,
oh, it's woke.
Little to no comments about the fundamentals like its storytelling, character writing, etc. And these non-critiques do unintentionally lead to the creation of poorly made films and TV shows, due to the volume of videos being made, but also due to the lack of meaningful criticism. These disjointed, monotonous rant videos are a major contribution to Velma having the biggest premiere day for a HBO Max animated series, especially because these reactionaries were making videos about Velma before the show had even began airing, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had contributed to Velma getting a second season. And with the addition of these reactionaries, it creates a lot of unproductive and pointless discussions, leading to bad faith criticism and pointing out flaws which aren't really there. Case in point being She-Hulk. As someone who witnessed the discourse surrounding the series, it was genuinely some of the most mind-numbing discussion I've seen surrounding a TV show that mainly comes down to the conversation featuring both pseudo-intellectuals and incels.
I can't find pussy anywhere. Nobody knows anything.
But in reality, the show was very inoffensive and was just another mediocre MCU Phase 4 project. What else is really new? Yet the discourse around this show mainly surrounded its protagonist, Jennifer Walters, due to the few cringe-inducing lines that she says within the first episode.
Bruh.
While also missing the point that those lines are supposed to be cringy. Jen is supposed to come off as dismissive and arrogant in response to Bruce's advice, since she thinks that just because she can quickly transform between her human and Hulk forms, she has mastered balance. But as Jen comes to learn in the latter episodes, she doesn't know how to balance her life between Jennifer Walters and She-Hulk. Jen's arrogance is a major character flaw which makes her a lot more compelling of a protagonist, and these reactionaries either don't understand this concept, or they do understand this concept, but are taking advantage of their audience's confirmation bias to misrepresent the show's writing. While I am defending the show, this doesn't mean that I believe She-Hulk is perfect. The season's pacing is rather quick, and I'm not too sure if that's due to incompetent writers or the shorter runtimes for each episode. Either way, it's still a problem. Another thing was the finale's meta-commentary on the MCU as a whole, because Jen breaking through Disney Plus wasn't really built up, and if anything became a victim of the Marvel spectacle that they were criticizing. Overall, the show was very inoffensive, and realistically, not as bad as it was made out to be, and with the common criticism of She-Hulk being that it's woke, I can't help but conclude that She-Hulk's backlash was mostly undeserved. I could point out a show that is a lot worse, and a lot more harmful than She-Hulk, which none of these reactionaries have even touched. And I'd argue this series is much more deserving of backlash and criticism, due to its handling of certain topics and incredibly harmful writing decisions. That show in question being Netflix's 13 Reasons Why. 13 Reasons Why bad? I know, incredibly brave take.
Who's your favorite fearless hero?
However, considering it has been almost 3 years since the series' fourth and final season, some viewers may have understandably forgotten why this show was problematic, with the reasons as to the show being problematic ranging from its romanticization of suicide, misrepresentation of mental health, and attempting to redeem a serial rapist.
Yeah. Look, I'll call you back for the motel.
And these matters have led to the harm of its target audience, which the show is supposedly wanting to help, when in reality the series is ripe with emotional triggers. Yet it got renewed time and time again, ending at a 4th season. But I've always been perplexed as to why the show got 4 seasons, so I've hypothesized that it was due to hate watching, not by the reactionaries I discussed earlier. Instead it was by the general audience. As each season went by, 13 Reasons Why became increasingly more bizarre, devolving from a relatively grounded story about retreading what led to Hannah Baker's suicide, swinging into a court case against the high school by the parents of Hannah Baker, as well as revealing an underground sexual assault ring that involved the school's baseball team, along with having Clay develop early onset schizophrenia as an organic way to develop his character, and not a pitiful excuse for Catherine Langford to get more screen time where it otherwise wouldn't make sense to do so.
And you're still allowed to make fun of me.
Allowed, obligated, who can say?
Which kicks down the door, leading to a whodunit murder mystery surrounding the death of Bryce Walker, the serial rapist I briefly mentioned earlier. Fucking hell, we need Benoit Blanc on this case.
In my mind is a fueled up racing car.
And finally, they tried to recapture that grounded normality which Season 1 had, but that's turned on its head due to Clay Jensen going on his Joker arc.
Am I safer now? Huh? I've got your gun! I've got your gun! Am I safer?
With the levels of absurdity increasing each season, there were multiple boycotts. YouTubers discouraged viewers from watching the show, but it still kept going due to the aforementioned absurdity. So the problem with hate watching is simply this: it unintentionally enables media that is of poor quality and is potentially harmful to succeed where it otherwise wouldn't have, and enables bad faith discussions surrounding media. Hate watching TV, film and animation is part of what leads to the continuation of problematic and poor media being created, and when the critiques of the bad media are of such low substance and lacking of detail, they are more likely going to be ignored. I see making critical content as advocating for better media to be made, and while these videos are most of the time going to fall on deaf ears due to the paycheck, as well as appeasing corporate overlords meaning more to the writers, producers and directors, rather than partaking in the creation of a good, thought-provoking product. The mainstream reactionary criticism of film, TV and animation doesn't quell this problem either. If anything, it unintentionally enables the issue, due to the fact it creates cognitive bias on both sides. One half will blindly hate something because of someone's opinion, and the other half will blindly love something because of someone else's opinion. It's just a continuous cycle that only benefits those at the top. With the current attitudes of the average audience and professional critics, there is no ending in sight. Anyway, I've been Enfixed, and I am a pretentious nobody.